Yet Nero, Rome's sixth emperor, would change all that. In the beginning, they were just rumors.
Nero practiced every kind of obscenity, and after defiling almost every part of his body, he finally invented a novel game. He was released from a cage dressed in the skins of wild animals and attacked the private parts of men and women who stood bound to stakes. Suetonius.
Had imperial power gone mad?
Romans see their past as this mixture of heroes and villains. And don't forget, it's senators who are writing the history. This history is not straight reportage of objective fact. This is a political battle between the aristocracy and the emperors. It's in the aristocrats' interest to belittle emperors. They can't belittle them while they're alive. They belittle them while they're dead.
But Nero was as much a victim of imperial power as its villain. His father died when he was only 3. He was brought up by his overbearing mother Agrippina, who had one ambition: to make her son emperor. The young Nero never shared her passion for the throne. As a child, he showed more interest in art than politics, but his mother deliberately ridiculed his musical talents. In 54 AD, at the tender age of 16, Nero became an unwilling emperor. He began by doing what emperors were supposed to do. He provided for the poor, building massive public baths and handing out cash to every Roman citizen. Rome, it seemed, was in capable hands, but whose hands were they? Agrippina still exercised a humiliating influence over her son. She minted coins that showed her next to the emperor. Nero was furious. He turned to the one thing he loved and thought he was good at: the theater. Yet Rome's performing artists were normally slaves, courtesans, or foreigners, never emperors.
How could one endure to hear, let alone see, a Roman, a senator, a Caesar, an emperor named on the program as a contestant? In putting on the mask of an actor, he has thrown off the dignity of his sovereignty. Cassius Dio.
When Agrippina joined the public outcry, Nero snapped. He immediately banished his mother from Rome. But distance did not solve the problem. Agrippina's repeated criticism incensed Nero. In a fit of anger, he asked the Praetorian Guard to silence his mother once and for all. Romans were appalled. It was their first glimpse of the emperor's brooding insecurity. Nero scrambled to resurrect his public image.
What Nero then does is a very dangerous experiment in playing to the people, because he plays in ways which traditionally have been defined as beyond the pale. To perform as a charioteer is definitely breaking all sorts of status barriers. And yet the charioteers are the pop stars of the day.
Nero's antics seem to have saved him. In 64 AD, a huge fire swept through Rome, destroying a third of the city. Half the population was left homeless. Nero's response was equally tragic. In the ashes of the devastated city, he built a massive 50-acre palace. His golden house had lavish gardens and huge lakes, even a private zoo. The emperor finally had what he'd always wanted, a peaceful retreat from political life. Rumors quickly circulated that the emperor had intentionally started the fire to clear space for his new palace. Nero panicked. He frantically searched for a scapegoat and settled on an obscure cult that had recently arrived in Rome.
Nero substituted as culprits and punished with the utmost refinements of cruelty a class loathed for their vices, who the crowd called Christians. Vast numbers were convicted, and derision accompanied their end. They were covered with wild beast skins and torn to death by dogs, or were fastened to crosses and burned to serve as lamps by night. Tacitus.
Most Romans felt sympathy for the victims. Nero's propaganda exercise had clearly failed. Once again, he took refuge in his own artistic fantasies and set off on a singing tour of Greece.
The Greeks alone are worthy of my efforts. They really listen to music. Nero.
Not surprisingly, the most powerful man in the world won every competition he entered. The emperor bribed judges and forced audiences to sit through every performance.
No one was allowed to leave the theatre during recitals, however pressing the reason. We read of women in the audience giving birth, and of men being so bored with listening and applauding that they shammed death and were carried away to burial. Suetonius.
Romans were outraged by Nero's indulgence and incompetence. On June 9th, 68 AD, the Senate declared Nero a public enemy and sentenced him to death. But Nero chose a far more theatrical end. He took his own life. His final words,
What an artist the world is losing.
It was the end of Rome's first imperial dynasty. Augustus had ruled with restraint. Tiberius had ruled with indifference. Nero hadn't really ruled at all. The tragic demise of Rome's first imperial dynasty would echo for centuries to come. There would be emperors in Rome for another 400 years, but their dynasties would all rule with the same rhythm of power. Like Augustus, they'd start off promising the best of times. Their generosity would give Rome its grandeur. Their armies would guarantee the empire its peace. But like Nero, their reigns would end in catastrophe. Excess would undermine Rome's greatness. Delusions would condemn millions to die. Power and glory, the curse of imperial Rome.